Всем привет, это проект Альфа.
Hello everybody, this is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolay Feldman. Anton Cherny is with us today. Okay, friend. Good health to you too. Well, we have not met for quite some time. And we did stay in touch, however. Text messages, phone calls since our previous stream. And you've been out there fighting on the front. At some point, I remember you sent a message saying that you will go for over a week, there'll be no connection, and I was telling our audience that, you're gone on some assignment, and then you showed up on my phone, and I'll putting the screenshot, what you're looking at, how you looked like when you came back online, and then you sent me another photo how you were lying after that assignment. So thank you for showing it. Well, tell us more where all that happened and how did that happen to you? We had a situation in our 3rd Battalion in Storm Paratroopers. We had a lot of new people who were on the front. Recently, many of them were refusing, many of them did not want to go on assignments. Storm Paratroopers imply that you have certain readiness to go on certain tasks that other troops cannot. But there was a time when new reinforcements that we got, many of them refused to go. And that's when our commander came and asked to help to bring people to the front positions. At first they were talking about just guiding them to. You basically bring them out to the trenches, to the positions, stay with them for about a day, and then return back to your unit. Well, of course, it works a little different in reality. So I went out to positions. I replaced a friend of mine who was working well in that grove, near that position. I want to say at the beginning that this settlement Berestovoye is not under us right now, and we share that forest with them. That grove, it's sort of on the way for them from point A to point B that they go through. And we've been working in that grove, carrying out our tasks on them. So Berestovoye, is it Kharkov district or Donetsk district? It's Kharkov district. All right, in that planted forest, that's where we were working. And everything worked rather well until these events that I'm gonna talk about. For a couple of days, it was relatively smooth as we got there. Then the drones noted our position and they started dropping grenades. We tried to conceal ourselves, but it's quite not as a leafy grove as you can imagine. Plus, there've been some fighting happening there. There are a lot of 200s, a lot of bodies there already from the previous activity, from their troops trying to cross. So eventually they started targeting our dugout, which was very simple. We only had maybe a one layer of pine as the roof, and it was very ill-prepared position, was more for concealment than for protection. So with the usual grenades, they eventually broke a little hole in the roof, and then FPV flew into that and caused a bigger explosion in there. We were lucky, though. We managed to leave that. We had another exit out from there, so we managed to leave this dugout. Nobody was injured or dead. Maybe a slight concussion, but nothing major. So this was at the beginning. And by the way, when we were just getting there, the road to that position, this is treated as an advice for those who will be facing these assignments for the first time. What are you to await when you go? Of course, you'll be told it's easy to get there, you have some cover, and you will see everything yourself. You know, another commonly used word. I want to preface all that and say it is very difficult. I've seen a lot, and I still cannot say I was fully prepared. It's, first of all, a long walk. And as you walk on the left, there is a forest that is not yours. And it's not too far. It's like within 150 yards away from you, where they have a fortified position with mortars, with more people, so not yours. And on the right is another grove that is also theirs. So you kind of go between them. You're sneaking between those two to your position, which is deeper in. And there are drones flying over you as well. As I was going, I had 2 drops on me from drone, and it was a grenade from automatic grenade launcher type explosive, and it exploded pretty close to me. I was hiding behind a tree, but it was very flimsy, and I'm a rather big fella, so it exploded pretty close. But thankfully to God, I made it through without much damage. So we got into positions, didn't suffer any losses, then carried out some tasks, and then moved back to our original position, returned, and there was another command a few days later to go back to those positions and carry out a few tasks there again. I reached our command in the morning on the radio, explaining that there is really no position in that grove to go to. Everything is burnt, that dugout is already exploded, so they're telling us there is some green cover there. There is a small piece of that grove that's still covered. So I did snuck out of our position, check out, yeah, indeed, there is a green. And by the way, there is always a drone hovering somewhere in your vicinity. So the moment you go to check anything out, the moment you raise your head is when they see you, and they'll probably drop something. And yeah, I did verify. So there is a green position there, there is a grove. I did want to verify with our command that there is nobody there, and they confirmed that yes, it is empty, so you guys can go. I decided that I'll go check myself. The moment I started my venture to that grove, I got 2 drops on me from UAVs, and I sent a radio signal to our guys to turn on the music, which we call the radio electronic interference device. And of course, their drones went incommunicado. And by the way, that radio interference, when it turns on, it blinds everybody, not just their drones, but our drones too. So you lose your own intel as well. So I had one other fellow with me, his call sign La Costa, Gena. We ran to that grove, and we got mortar working on us almost immediately after the first 2 drops from UAVs. And we did not reach that grove because we saw that somebody started shooting in our direction from rifles, from AKs, and it would be a bad proposition to continue moving forward. You cannot really call it fully leaved, full of big, deep grove. It was also beaten up a bit, so you can't really hide there. And we decided to return, and that area where we were, they covered that with mortar fire just minutes after. So also, when you are there in the front, it's daily contact with them. It's not like you're sitting in a trench or laying in a secret position and maybe meeting them once a month. No, in our situation, we face them at least 2 to 3 times a day. Continuous drops from UAVs, a bunch of mortars, and of course, they keep storming in between. More things to talk about, especially in that direction where I was. That's the direction that was covered by 2 third brigades, one special brigade, another Paratroopers Storm Brigade. They were facing pretty much the same situation. Russians were continuing with their meat storms. They would send 3 people in the middle, in the field, so that your drone would see that and you'd be paying attention to them. You start revealing your positions, start attacking them. Meantime, while you're figuring out these 3, on the left or on the right flanks, they would send smaller groups too. And they'll try to get to your positions on the sides. And if they send some sort of prepared, some good specialists, your position, your task will be in dire straits if you miss them. We were, however, lucky, though. I'll tell you how lucky it was, what lucky means in this case. But anyway, we're sitting in our base position. They're dropping UAVs on us, and at some point I decided, a few days later, I decided that since our leadership, our command, keeps bugging us to go to that grove out there. So I took it upon myself to go, and this was the time when I was taking off my armor. I needed to change my t-shirt that was burnt from a previous incident. And since me and Maxim were talking Russian, a pal of mine, that dugout is being discovered by Russians. They heard our Russian language, and we're very close there, just so you understand. It's not 100 yards away, it's much closer sometimes. And they, I guess they were wondering, they were a bit lost, they heard Russian language, and they entered the dugout. And he raises his Kalashnikov towards me. I see his Russian flag on his chest, on his dress, and I remember his call sign, Shanti. He was checking Shanti, what's there. He was getting a message on his radio. That dude is not alive anymore. And we were speaking Russian, but at that time our radio gave us out. Our Motorola radio starts to speak Ukrainian. Somebody is calling for us. That breaks our cover, and they lose all the last of concerns they had, whether we're Russians or Ukrainians. So he's starting to shoot in my direction, and my pal grabs the gun. He was laying his back to them. He grabs the gun with his hand and pushes it sideways. So the bullets hit the legs of Lacosta, of Gena, and another guy that was with us, he grabbed his gun and he finished them off. At that time, they also managed to throw gas grenades. And thankfully, we had NATO gas masks with us. So some of us start putting it on. It's very critical situation. Everything is happening so fast. And I heard from the radio a warning that there is a different gas coming towards us, and really bad ones. This one, you don't usually survive if you face it, unless you have a cover, so, or protective measures. So, and I don't know if that's life hack or not, that's I'm gonna share, but I remember there were 5 pills in our medical box. Each of us has a small medical set, and there are 5 pills there from I guess everything. I didn't even read the details what they were, but I was told by medics that if you're wounded, take 5 of these, and in 5 minutes you'll be feeling all right. You won't feel pain too much. I don't remember the exact name, but that's what I did. So I took them immediately, and I managed then to put the gas to evac and get out of this affected area. These Russians who wandered onto our position, they're already laying out there 200s, and the drone dropped a grenade and left. So we are back to square one, we're holding our position, and those people who were with us, who were still not wounded, they pack their things and go, and it's only me, Grach, and my wounded people who are with me. The guy, Gena, with 2 legs shot up, Disney, the guy who got his hand wounded, and probably an eye was also affected, and he also, one of the legs, he couldn't walk. And there was one more fella who had a wound in his face, so it was bleeding profusely. I had only my hand scratched and nothing major. So I go on the radio and say that me and Grach are okay, and then we have several 300s with us, wounded. So I was thinking that those guys who left, they will leave and then get reinforcements and come back, pick us up and help us evac. But what happened, they went to the next position, which is about 150 yards from that place, and they decided to remain there. So I'm there in a t-shirt, which is burnt. Armor is not on me. Grach is staying with me in that area. He got wounded later. I think part of his lip was torn, but we'll talk about it later. So we are still holding position. I'm reaching on the radio telling that they need to pick up the 300s. Several fellows come over. Call sign Canada, Sergey. They come pick one of the 300s. Actually, no, they actually pick both. They pick 2 woundeds, and we have 1 wounded left. And Grach, that buddy of mine, also stays there. So on the very forward position is just me, wounded, and Grach, the fellow of mine. So Yeah, I guess here we are, three fighters. One of us can't even walk. I guess he's there for intimidation purposes. So we remain there for the next day. They continue working in our position. The drones try to drop their grenades. One of the times is when grenade fell right next to us. It was so close, I saw that explosion, like slightly further than my hand can reach. I guess I was lucky that I leaned back and turned a bit, and I got a bunch of the shrapnel in my right thigh, chest, and the arm. And there are maybe three major things that needed some sewing. There are a lot of small cuts. Right. I looked at your medical documents. They tell that you have a lot of shrapnel, face, arms, thigh. Yeah, that's the result of a grenade, right? Yep, that's what it was. And I cannot say what explosive was it. I think it was some self-made explosive. Cannot be sure, but when on the stabilization point, they were taking the metal out of me and taking shrapnel out, they put me to sleep, so I didn't see what they were taking out, and I cannot quite tell what exactly the shrapnel was. And when I got back to my senses, I already was mostly patched and bandaged, that picture that you saw. After that, we had to evacuate from this position after this explosion. Yeah, tell us more about evacuation. Okay, evacuation. Those who watch the movies and think that there'll be a jet or a helicopter and there'll be cover and people will be evacuating you, that's not what it's going to be like. It is jungle there. The stronger ones survive. Everything that you are using in your life to live, to feed your families, some strengths and weaknesses that you have of your character, this will definitely be revealed there. All your fears, all your, I don't know, I guess fears, right? Phobias, all your opinions and worldviews, especially at the beginning. It will be very difficult. Many people are afraid of darkness, of different sounds in the dark. Our head starts to calculate all probabilities and risks, even when it's exaggerated. You will see that, guys. It will initially work against you, but then later you'll learn to use the energy of this. Your organism, your body will be in shock, but you should learn to use this energy, to use it to your advantage. If you have any bags, any sacks, when you have a minute, start adding soil to them to fortify your position. That's if you're staying there, if you're not evacuating. If you are evacuating, however, nobody is going to be helping you much. One thing, very important, if you have a radio, no hassle, no panic. Like when that explosion happened next to me, I understand that my eye is not seeing, I'm full of adrenaline, and it was a small room, small footage where it blew up, so I'm in concussion, I don't quite hear well. I remember still where the radio was, so I reach for that, find it, and I cannot hear back there whether they heard you, what they respond to you, but you scream at this radio that you are alive, and make sure you tell them that you are going to them. Because if you don't, you're facing a risk that they may shoot you as well, if they don't know that you're coming. So tell us more, how long did you walk? So 250 yards was the first position where they bandaged me. And then after that, there was 6 kilometers, so about 4 miles. And it's, you don't know where you're going. First of all, you don't really see the end point. You kind of know the direction, but it's dark. You don't hear the UAVs because you're still in concussion. You don't hear well. Plus, it's dark, and we're very mixed there on the front. You never know which grove belongs to whom. So I wanted to say here, many people think that the closer the enemy is, the worse it is. I would not say no, the other way. For that terrain where we are, the closer the enemy to you, the better it is. Especially if they don't know that you're there, right? And everything is easier, of course, when they don't know that you're there. They don't see you 200 yards away, they don't shoot at you. And frankly, if they did not have such an overwhelming advantage in drones, artillery, mortars, we would not have issues with them. We are stronger than them otherwise, but they just have more support. And every time where we hit them, we notice interesting things about them. So first of all, we notice that on very rare occasions, they have water with them, right? Normally, to sustain your life there in the front, you need water and food, right? And every time when you get a chance to inspect the enemy, maybe only once we found a pack of cigarettes, and we also one time found 12,000 rubles with one fella. Don't know where he was going to shop with all that. I saw his documents. He was from somewhere in Perm in Siberia, and he used to be a police officer, right? So a cop fighting. And they usually do not carry neither water nor food. And they have individual medical kits with certain items, but in bigger ones, in unit medical kits, they have a lot of Promidol. What I also want to note, if you are on assignment and if you have killed your enemy, never come close to him immediately and never touch things. First of all, never come too close immediately. That's the main danger, because the moment you show up, you'll get dumped an explosive on your head by UAV. From their drone, they cannot see where do you shoot the enemy from. And they will be monitoring, they'll be watching where you approach him. You know also that by default you need to survive if you don't have water, so if you're running out of water, definitely you will get there, and they will be expecting you to come to the eliminated enemies to see if maybe they have water supplies. But to be smart, if you need to approach them, get to that position by some dusk or dawn. That's when the drone with the usual visual tools cannot observe you. And it starts to, at night, it's easier to detect you by temperature. And I think we have that too. Basically, they can give a square and they can hover a drone over that. They can then turn on the temperature gauge difference to see, for example, the ground is 13 Celsius and the location where you are could be 27, so something is warm, right? There are no dogs at the front, so definitely it's a human, and then off you go, and the explosive is going flying on your head. So the best time is dusk and dawn, when they cannot distinguish much. The sun is either going down or going up. The temperature differential is not too big. Also, make sure if you are approaching the eliminated enemies, make sure you put the gloves on, because it's not a clean scene, and sometimes when you get there, it may be a day or two later, it could be some flies and all. So in our encounters, maybe once we found a bottle of water and a couple of packs of cigarettes on them. They don't carry any food, they don't carry any water. Another interesting thing we observed, their uniform is very clean, it's fresh new. And their guns are also clean, they're still in grease. They were not using them for practice, they were not trained well. So they were just sent from the Berestovaya point to the point number 2, and they just needed to cross that grove on the way, that's where we were catching them, up until they figured out that's where we were hiding. And so after we had to withdraw, after all the wounding, you've seen the bandages and stuff, that was done a bit later with all the sewing and real bandages and casts, because I was walking for 6 miles after the initial encounter. So it looks like it's just a continuous meat storm from Russians, right? Where they send freshly mobilized. They obviously have issues with the cadre, since they are sending even police officers and so cops and people who have not trained, exercised, or used the guns that they carry. They apparently have a lot of analgesic and a lot of pills to maintain them. That's what they're given in their medical kits, but they don't really have much supplies and or much training. So my next question to you, Paratroopers, Storm Paratroopers. This is not a regular troop, right? What's the reason to send fresh people into your rotation? What was the reason to send also you as experts, as professionals who know how to storm positions, who were trained to do certain things? Do you think it made sense to send you there to hold these positions? Do you see a reason behind the orders that you were given? Well, Nikolai, at the time when you were there, you had things in a different frequency. Your task is to survive. Everything that you think about is survive yourself and make sure your people survive too. And you motivate them to stay alert and to continue fighting. Right now, looking at this from afar, I know that these 3 positions we've lost already. At the moment when I was there, I probably would be keeping, the guy like me would be holding these positions. And even, you see, I was bombed to smithereens. But I think newer guys that are being sent there, they definitely, I doubt they'll be holding it. And frankly, when it's just a name at this point, Paratroopers Storm Brigade, we don't even have a single brigade that is staffed up to 30%. Just take our 10th company. Command was pretty decent. I have nothing bad to say about them. They're good people. What I can talk about is, let's take 100 people. A nominal company is 100, right? I'm not going to give you an exact number. Out of these 100, maybe 20 would be the ones who actually will have enough guts and motivation to go to line 0, to mile 0, to the front. Then there'll be a bunch of those who would do whatever they can to avoid getting there, and there'll be some who will be boycotting that in the open. And, it's probably stemming from a bigger problem, because one thing, when you get drafted to territorial defense, that's one proposition for you to fight, right? The whole other proposition is a Paratroopers Storm Brigade, right? You have to meet certain criteria by health, by physical preparedness. And the whole system starts with the drafting commission in order to get their rewards for a certain number of milestones, a certain number of people called and drafted upon. So they figured somebody that these people look all right, they can draft them. They were trained somewhere for a few weeks. They were told some other bullshit in the training facility, which is very different from what we see here on the front. And there are no pretty work. There's no beautiful work on the front. Your task is to get from point A to point B. Your task is to survive the next 12 hours or 24 hours. And they understand that life is not sugar anymore. Everything is very serious. That another life hack for you, our viewers. And I think it's adequate for the war. It's dirty life hack, but for example, if you're getting thrown incendiary rounds on you and you don't have water, water is at premium there, you have nothing to douse the fire with, people are peeing in bottles, so they have some liquid to put the fires out. So you use urine for that purpose. And practically everybody who are there, they get it real fast. These moral norms that you have in society, they're very eroded there. The main task there for you is to survive. And how you're doing this doesn't quite matter. If anything, it's, kudos to people who thought that, hey, you can use urine for that. Yeah, say, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Yeah, I wanted to clarify that question I asked before. So, having left this clash, how would you estimate the efficacy of these actions, of these commands on the front? Are they needed? As I was explained, Nikolai, how the system was supposed to work, and we're talking about, let me try to rephrase it. So, for example, there is some fortified position, some long-term fire position on the front from which I can control my sector. And if I see some situation developing, I report and I put the fire in this quadrant so I don't let the life forces of our enemy to come through. At this time we get mortar fire, we get UAVs, we get some other support, so the enemy should never be able to reach us. And I also have our own intel drone above my head that's helping me to see the field. So that's how it's supposed to be. And imagine you've been dropped in some grove, right? Your vehicle doesn't go further. So in a proper scenario, this scheme needs to start working at this moment. To help you get to the position that you need to take, you need to have radio electronic interference on the moment you're dropped. So they would cover you from the enemy's UAVs. You don't need to order it every 5 minutes, but if you hear their noise, their engines, you get on the radio, you ask for that music, and the moment it turns on, you can run through that sector pretty fast. Drones will not reach you. But this is also something that prompts their mortar for fire. If they see in a certain quadrant our radio electronic interference working, they'll start using mortars on that quadrant because they suspect we have some troops moving in this part. You don't need to be a professor to understand that. But mortar is not a drop from the drone, and automatic grenade launcher is also not a drone. The drone is probably the scariest proposition. It's right above you. On the safety gauge, it is probably the most serious. You don't even hear that well. You only have maybe 2 seconds to react to the explosive falling from the UAV. With a mortar round, you have a bit more time. You hear it from afar. And you have to be really unlucky to get hit with that. You have time to fall on the ground and find some cover. But other problem is that our radio electronic interference is not always working. They have certain, I don't know where they get them, China maybe, but they're turning on the power-ups, the power enhancers. So their drones can fly further. And by the way, our music, our interference also turns off our UAVs. So when you're asking for that aid, don't forget that you will be turning off our own drones as well. Even if the operator could have told you that there is something to the left or to the right of you, there is a group somewhere of the enemy, you will not get this message. And their drones sometimes keep working through it because they get some Chinese new generation power boosters that work even through our interference sometimes. And people who know more about those details, you can find them for the stream, so they can tell you more. And we cannot interrupt them. I don't know if they're using ultra high or ultra low frequencies. Our interference does not disrupt them recently. So everything starts flying at you. But anyway, so if you get to the point, or when you get to the point of your sector, you replaced who was there before you, and you're watching carefully your sector, you're observing if there's any motion, you're reporting on the radio. Artillery, FPVs, mortars, they work. And if somebody somehow breaks through, that's when you're supposed to fight the enemy with your rifle and the other arms. But you don't have that. Everything is much more pathetic. It's more of a meat grinder, and they often reach your positions, and you shoot from a very short distance at each other. Okay, let's do it nominally. Let's look at some mathematics here. How many people in your group were part of your detachment who came to this operation? How many of them came out? And how many of enemy did you destroy? How many of your own personnel have you lost? Okay, Nikolai, for the first 4 days we fought without any losses. And we put down about 17 enemies altogether. And I want to say that probably 5 of ours were most productive workers against 17 of theirs. And we killed the 17. If we stopped at this time, we could have said, yes, we prevailed, we have won this war. But this is not what happened. So, as I mentioned before, remember, friends of ours left the position and they did not come back. They had some obstacles on their way. It would be awesome if they could make it back and evacuate us, but they couldn't. I also did not have proper warm gear, and I was covering with a medical foil blanket. and you could hear it from afar. And we have maybe 50 yards between us, maybe 80. So they heard where I was roughly, and that's where how I got the grenade on our position. So if we stopped the war at the beginning, at the first couple days, sure, you could be very euphoric about that. You're winning. But if you're continuing, and as the days tick away, I think out of 18 of ours who were coming to that position, there are not too many professionals. There are a lot of noobs. And I want to say more than half of us did not come out. So, again, some of them are 300, 200, so some are wounded, some are killed. At the beginning, the first moment when we lost ours, we lost 4 people immediately. So when we were lucky, when things were going our way, we were more successful, we felt successful. But we should not be too giddy about it, because for them, these 17, with their numbers, it's like maybe one of ours. They have a lot of everything. They have a lot of arms. They have a lot of people compared to us. And, you know, when people are saying on the civil side, hey, we need more arms, we need more rifles, we need more machine guns, you don't. There's a ton of them in the groves out there. You can scavenge anything you want. But people try to limit how much they carry. It's much more precious to carry extra water with you for your rotation than an extra gun. And I want to talk about the new bullets that we are making, the NATO caliber, the golden-ish color. On the 3rd or 4th bullet, it jams the gun, and they are making them in vignettes, I think. Not like grayish brass of USSR times, but they're really shiny golden. And you carry that zinc with you, and then they don't shoot. And, you know, that's a very deadly proposition. You'd easily be gonna be dead if the jams in the fight. So what we're doing very often, we're scavenging the bullets from our enemies, because they are carrying the Soviet bullets, which unfortunately are way more effective than our current Ukrainians ones. Plus, frankly, you're not gonna be cleaning the rifle at the front. There's no time or place to do that. And our bullets and our NATO caliber guns, they jam too often. Kalashnikovs and the older 7mm caliber is working much better. And one of my friends compared the deputy battalion commander took the Soviet bullet, the Soviet 7 caliber, and they took the NATO one, compared. It's slight difference, but Soviet is so much better in terms of non-jamming and being effective. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for sharing this experience. I think this is precious. I appreciate you being here, telling us more about the front and what's happening. We very often hear on the civilian side that the most important thing for us is to preserve our troops. We have to maintain our professionals, because they're the ones transferring the experience. They're the ones making sure that the new soldiers, new draftees live longer and have time to get experience. Since you've been fighting for 10 years, your experience is precious. It's so more important to transfer your experience to new soldiers than to just use you on the front. So it does make sense if our troops come to prepared positions where you can actually carry out your tasks, where you have a capability to also train your soldiers as you're there. Why is it not happening? Given that we do not have advantage in numbers, each specialist is worth his weight in gold, why, from the level of commanders, do we not send the message to preserve yourself, to make sure that you carry out the task as long as and as careful as you can to preserve your people? Why do you think this is not being emphasized, Anton? Well, Nikolai, the way I see that situation, every point that we are losing on the front line, so in the groves, they're not real positions, they're called points, and each point has a number. This is being reported. They have the streams to Kiev, to General Command, and that's where the big generals are sitting and observing, oh, damn, you lost the point. I'm not going to say anything bad about my battalion commander. We indeed are like family there, but he will definitely get pressure because of this. I don't know what exactly are they telling them, how are they influencing our commanders, but after that, our commanders start to demand us to go and retake those points, those positions. And, after some pressure, that was like me. That's why I agreed to, okay, let me go and take care of that point myself. I'll try to retake that. And then, if I would have left just a minute earlier, if I did not remove my bullet vest to change the remnants of my t-shirt, if I left our bunker, our dugout a minute earlier, I would have bumped right into those Russian soldiers. I would have been not talking today. But okay, going back to our commanders, they're being pressured to retake those positions. I would think, as long as it's successful, as long as it's bringing us success, we got 17 of them by this operation. But maybe that made sense. But the moment they uncovered our position, the moment they burned our dugout, our camouflaged supplies there, we would have need to move around, maybe move left, maybe move right, maybe withdraw and find a different place. But we unfortunately were ordered to continue pressing, taking this point. You would be more lucky or better off if you had some plan B, right? If you were more flexible within the situation. Us on the front, it's difficult to think because you're concussed after the explosions, you're barely holding the position you're in. You don't have time to think that through. But on a higher level, it would be nice for them to have some plan B that they can tell us to fall back to. And everything is holding on some crazy people like me who are still holding despite of all the enemy pushing. And it would be nice, yeah, I agree. It would be nice if our command had a plan B. But unfortunately, they are a machine that hears certain reports and they think that it's successful and they continue pressing for it until it becomes utterly unsuccessful. So, Anton, you've been reporting though, right? You've been telling them that there is a drone above you, that they've figured out your position. What's strange to me is that our command is not making timely decisions, that if you've been uncovered, if you've been spotted and your position is being destroyed, eliminated, they're not maneuvering you out of that spot to preserve you, to preserve your lives, make sure that you're available to work tomorrow and carry out more tasks and provide some safety for our soldiers. Look, why I'm asking this in so much detail is that now there is a lot of investigation happening around Vuhledar, what happened there. And let me finish this question. Hang on, let me finish formulating it. So, it is not exactly clear what happened there for wider audience, let's put it this way. But we understand that there is no Vuhledar already in Ukraine, it's been taken. There is some information from 72nd Brigade that has lost their brigade commander right on the eve of them leaving Vuhledar. There is some information about flanks falling, and one of the flanks was held by 123rd Territorial Defense, after which the fighters of that territorial defense almost voluntarily, from what we hear, leave their positions, and their battalion commander committed suicide. And we don't know whether it was because of the pressure that he was facing during the streams with Kiev, as you're saying, or maybe some other reasons. But any information, I think, is important. Why is that happening? Why battalion commanders experience so much pressure? Why soldiers experience so much pressure to conduct sometimes mindless operations when you'd be way better off to dynamically maneuver and create dynamic defense instead of what we're doing now? When it's left up to the soldiers on the front to make decisions, which they cannot be making just due to the lack of information and vision from where they are. So, however, our general command is insisting on certain orders even when they are getting reports that it's unattainable. They're still demanding to return the control of the point and return back on this point. Right. So I have actually quite a few friends who are fighting on the front, right? And that situation about 123rd Territorial and Vuhledar, everything started, as I was told, from the post, from the media post by Mariana Bezugla on the 30th of August. I don't remember where and which of the social media she posted that, but she posted that 72nd Brigade is going for rotation, that was holding Vuhledar for 2 years, that they're leaving for rotation. And who is to replace them? And 123rd Territorial Brigade is supposed to take their position. Where was that brigade fighting before? They were in Kherson direction before. And talking to guys who are from, by the way, from Vuhledar themselves, so they know this area, and they were privy to the events unfolding there through their acquaintance and themselves being there. But what I was told is that 123rd Brigade entered having only little small trucks, no armor, no armored vehicles. They had a couple of large caliber machine guns on those trucks and the usual Kalashnikovs. That's all they had really to hold the position. So we're talking about Lieutenant Colonel Igor Grip, who committed suicide, right? Okay. 123rd Brigade, where is their dislocation home? It's Nikolaev. 186th Battalion is also Nikolaev district. So they would be much closer used in Kherson district instead of Vuhledar. So they were supposed to be, actually when they were defending Kherson, they were supposed to go for rotation, but then instead of rotation, they were sent to Vuhledar. So that's a violation already there. They did not get any refitting, they didn't get new people, new personnel. And from what I heard about their commander, he was born in 91, he was only 33 years old, he was already lieutenant colonel. I keep hearing good reports about him, that he was a good man, that he was for his people, that he was trying to protect his detachment. He never gave them unattainable orders and commands to just that would lead to unnecessary death of personnel. So he was a decent commander. He was a reasonable one. He still was experiencing probably a high pressure from Hortitsa, the district command. I would not say it as a fact, but I think it's Hortitsa that was commanding him. And people who talked to those who've been privy to those streams, they're saying that he just did not, could not tolerate more of that pressure, and he made this choice to take his life. But with his death, I want to say that he did bring a light, especially in the territorial defense arms, that our territorial defense, they are very ill supplied. They're poorly supplied. They're not the frontline groups. A truck is what? You can go fishing, maybe hunting on it, right? It's not a vehicle for war. We imagine that it's okay, they have a truck, but this is not a truck for the war that we are fighting. It's too easy to damage, it's not worth of protection it can provide. So he did, with his death, he did bring up important points of discussion in our society. But when we're talking about Mariana and her post, today, by accident, I was talking to some friends of mine, and I asked him where he was serving. He said that he's from 125th Brigade, so they're neighbors there. And I asked him if he heard about 123rd. And we talked about Mariana too. He expressed the following opinion. He said that when that whole situation with the 125th Brigade happened before, that she shed light upon, this is a 215th Battalion. That story was back in May. That's when it happened. From the village Liptsi, where this previous situation with Mariana happened. In front of them, there was another brigade from Konotop, in front of 125th. And they were not really fighting too much. When these guys came over, they started showing the class, and the neighbors, of course, and the Russians across the line started fighting harder. And by the way, another thing to comment here. I don't know how true it is. Another acquaintance of mine recently, I'm not going to disclose his name, but he said that there were some calls from above to let some buses with cigarettes, 3.5 tons of cigarettes, to let them go to Russian territory. And 125th Territorial Defense was standing on those positions that those buses were supposed to go through. So there was some trade happening, apparently. And Mariana visited them. She created the media hype over her visit. How long was she there? The 20 minutes after her visit, they started to get mortar fire, so that's when she left. So just 20 minutes. But after her visit, their position was destroyed. They couldn't have held it more. Their position was decimated by Russian artillery and mortar fire, so they had to withdraw, the fallback. 123rd Brigade. Now, she posts that material about 72nd being replaced by 123rd Territorial Brigade. And Territorial Brigade, much poorer, as we know, equipped. But I don't know if she put their name in the post, but basically one of the best brigades is being replaced with some other. Regardless of whether she talked about 123rd, it is an indicator that the 72nd is very tired, that they're about to be withdrawn. And in Ugledar, Russians have the advantage 9-1 on ours. So, of course, if they get the news about rotation, that they see that as an opportune moment. And we can say that 123rd would not be able to have held against such an overwhelming enemy. I actually found her post here. Dmitry, can we put it on the screen? Yeah, here it is. So she's writing, that's the 30th of August. I'll read it here. She's writing that, according to my data, Syrsky is removing 72nd Brigade from Vugledar that was repelling Russian attacks there for 2 years and knows the area. Russians are also aware and they're preparing. This will be a catastrophe similar like we had in Donetsk and New York when the 24th Brigade was withdrawn. I have an impression that Syrsky is breaking our front apart on purpose. So that's what she wrote. Right, those who are tracing all that, and I would say that rotation is the most important word here. Syrsky, who replaces them, that's internal politics. But the fact that she mentioned that they will be going into rotation, this is super important. And that implies that there'll be some instability on the front, that somebody is already backing, that that's a good opportune moment for additional move. And they knew already that there'll be some territorial defense unit coming to replace them. I suspect they have enough intel in Russia, so they'll be coming there from Kherson, so they won't be coming too powerful as well. They'll be weakened, and that becomes now a very tasty proposition for them to take. Also, on the 24th, 26th of September, that road to Vugledar, that logistics road, that was already under full control by Russians. They were about a kilometer, slightly over a kilometer away from the road. Nothing can really pass, nothing big. So it's already a cul-de-sac. There's a cauldron where they are about to encircle our troops. So in order to withdraw with some numbers and equipment, you need to ask your enemy to allow you to give you a green light to leave. Are you implying that's what's happening on the front sometimes, that we strike agreements with our enemy, that they let us withdraw? Well, not exactly an agreement, it's understandable, but I would put it this way. Earlier, in the early phases of war, we could have done it. I know that there were some agreements like that when the enemies were letting us leave in exchange for not standing and defending till the last. You see that, though, like in Debaltseve, right? If you're preparing to leave, you control, you monitor the area, you see that the columns will be leaving. They'll be shelled, of course, they'll be attacked, but some percent will succeed in leaving. It will not be a total decimation. On the 24th of September, logistics was already hanging by a thread. That's the time when we should be withdrawing people from Vuhledar. And since there is no supplies coming, we need to remove them, right? Unfortunately, we decided to protract that to October till we're withdrawing from there. And I think 1st of October could have played into that because that's the day of our defender of Ukraine, right? I think this was more of a PR proposition that Butусov wrote, that we did not want to allow bad news for the 1st of October. So after the 1st of October and the cheerful words and Zelensky is posing for pictures, then we get the Vuhledar withdrawal. Let me bring up another post that she wrote on the 31st of August. Who wrote to me about 72nd Brigade in Vuhledar, that people are needed to be withdrawn and let them rest, and not tell that they need to stay because they know the territory, they know how to fight, they know this sector. It's obvious that these detachments need to be withdrawn for rotation, but unfortunately, right now, rotation has different meaning. 24th Brigade was removed from Donetsk to Chasov Yar in the same fashion, so from hell to complete hell instead of rotation. As a result, we had a catastrophe on that direction, and we have more dead and wounded. And this is just one of the dozens of cases. Make your conclusions. My previous publication had its reaction. I think the problem is that Generality stubbornly keeps ignoring the need to rotate on time and to create real reserves, real reserve battalions in battle brigades. And instead, they're sending newly draftees with the new brigades to replace the existing brigades that are removed for rotation. This is the key mistake because they cannot hold position, and that leads our front to collapse. And unfortunately, our Generality doesn't seem to be able to make these conclusions. They don't have the right firmware. So, speaking about that post, rotation, I don't know if our viewers know or not, but rotation needs to be prepared in a lot of detail and then needs to be conducted swiftly and effectively without any media coverage so that the enemy would not know when it's happening, and that should have happened all of a sudden as a surprise to not let the front collapse. Accordingly, Bezuglia is publishing the information about the rotation, right? She brings the light to the media, and then she says that her publication actually had result and rotation didn't happen, is not going to happen. In fact, rotation does happen, but later, way beyond when it should have occurred. And then instead of 72nd Brigade, they get 124th with very light armor, light equipment, without proper weapons to counter Russian presence on this front, with some, but this very light infantry, and they crumble and they leave their positions. They cannot sustain their position under fire, and they withdraw. So what questions can one pose to the 123rd Brigade if they were basically set up? They were pushed into the most unfavorable positions for rotation. They got media attention on the fact that they're entering these positions, and twice in two messages that are very contradictory to each other. So that draws even more attention to this rotation, and of course they crumble that part of the front. Plus, you're saying that their commander Grip is getting extra pressure after this situation. And my simple question here is, what pressure can be exerted on him when Vuhledar is already lost? People have withdrawn in different fashion. What kind of pressure can he be facing? Go back to Vuhledar and take it back? Is that the order? Well, look, Nikolai, I think, and again, this is just my line of thought, my opinion. How would I behave talking to command? For example, on one scale, you have people with whom you work, whose lives depend on you, who entrust their lives, your subordinates who entrust their lives and their future to you as a commander. And on the other hand, you have opinionated and some created respect or expectations from big star generals somewhere in Kiev. And here you are between two lights, whether you are, how do you take this situation? Do you go for your human side or your organizational side and bureaucratic side? And he decided to take a third path. And I'm saying that from the point of view of a military officer, right, a military serviceman. I want to say that he was attacked. He suffered a lot of ad hominem attacks. Some people, even within his battalion, were spreading rumors that there were some money exchanged in order for the territorial defense would not be sent to line 0, to the actual front, hot front. But that was never confirmed. But again, this also adds to the pressure that he's being accused of bribery. And here's another thing that's on my mind. I watched the video of his funeral. There were his friends, there were more officers, and I think it's Crooked Lake where he was buried. That's where he's from, the village or small township. And what I want to say here is, how are they investigating his death? Is it suicide or is it pushing to suicide? Because if it is a suicide, then there has to be some explanation. Why did that happen? I would want that investigation to be as open as possible to the media, to the public. Because why Mariana Bezugla is allowed to make these investigations and nobody responds, there's no official fallout after that. And here we're talking about 125th Brigade in May that she affected, 213th Battalion in Liptsi, that she was there, what happened there after her visit, after her publication. There is a post about 72nd Brigade and what was happening there. So it does affect public opinion about Syrsky and our command. For enemy, they don't care about Syrsky. For Russians, it's just the letters in the name. But de facto, she's telling the circumstance on the front that there is rotation happening. She should not be talking about any rotation. This is absolutely forbidden. So she posted her perceived interests higher than the interests of our government, of our country, of those guys who are serving there. Right, Anton, I understand that there is some different classification in the criminal code and how they conduct investigation, but because of any death, there is a procedural investigation. Why did that happen? So it can be qualified differently, that's true. And they can close it because they can consider it to be just a suicide. If they investigate it as a suicide, there is no reason to consider it to be a murder, or there is any reason for it to be criminal. However, we do have a different angle. Pushing to suicide, this is another article, there is another angle that this investigation can take. Right, and that's what I'm saying, Nikolai. We will see by the investigation how do they want, and if they do want to dig deeper, what is happening. Anton, one needs to be making proper information requests into our bureaucracy, into our government, to make sure that this happens. Agree, Nikolai, and it has to be as open as possible so people understood what actually was happening. And we need to be sure that there are lessons drawn from this situation, because if we just closed our eyes to the fact that it happened, I think we'll be in the wrong. It is not an average event that a patriot, a 33-year-old battalion commander, committed suicide, right? Lieutenant Colonel, very successful before that, he had a good career, good service. I'm reading about him here. He partook in the fights in Ilovaisk, in defense of Mariinka and Krasnogorovka. So yeah, he was very distinguished, very established. Nothing predicted, right, that he would be committing something like that. Right, he also had an award of Bogdan Khmelnytsky, a third degree on the 2nd of June and 23rd for fighting in a certain, I go here in details where that happened, and one more order for bravery in the 24th. So this year he got a second award. See, people are talking about him real well. He appears to have been a good fellow. All right. Well, friend, in any case, I think it's important that we have talked about it. First of all, we discussed your experience of survival in those jungle and the reason for our soldiers to have to face this survival. It would be nice if we did not go into these horror stories and the war would be fought differently, as it should be. And we're trying also to answer some questions, different accusations that currently float in our society about different brigades, about territorial defense. In Kharkov, 125th was accused of things. Now in Vuhledar, 123rd Territorial Defense is being accused with a certain lieutenant colonel, and that resulted in a tragedy. And I think society needs to be aware of it and needs to make effort to investigate what actually happened. What I also want to say, you are still being treated, right? You're still getting your medical treatment. And I read through some of your medical documents that you shared. What plans do you have? Your plans for future? Are you going to go back? Nikolai, of course, I will be coming back to my unit. First of all, I talk to my friends there, to my buddies on the front. They need one like me that supports me too. And my experience, I definitely see that I can share that. You know, same thing with doctors. I'm telling them, stop poking me with your vitamins, just treat my eye and I'll go there to continue fighting. I wanted to note one more thing. The medical system that we have, I don't want to attack them per se, but there are some elements. First of all, thank them hugely for fixing me up, for patching me up. They patched my meat, and thankfully my body is in better shape. But with the eye, they overstayed certain operations and overdelayed them. And now I have to do some very expensive shots and a couple more surgeries to get back to decent vision. Another thing I wanted to mention, you know what I didn't like about our system? When I was brought from Kharkov to Lvov with the evacuation train, it was raining here. And one thing is me, right? I was already feeling a bit better, and again, it's me. But there are also other wounded people, as you understand. I was just slightly patched, but there were guys who just on the gurneys from the surgery room, they were even having trouble bringing them to Lvov. And in my mind, how it should be, right? The train arrives, the emergency vehicles come, unload, load, and take to the hospital. And in order not to keep taking that line, in order to preserve their hardware, their train, they basically unloaded us in the middle of the night out in the street. And here we are, a bunch of people on gurneys at 3 o'clock in the morning under rain. And that situation was not exactly what I liked. And I don't know the name of that colonel who was there managing this operation. And he was talking to one of our people who was there, one of the wounded, who was a bodyguard. He sees his chevron that he is a bodyguard. And he was laughing at him, saying, well, you shouldn't be coming here. You should be going a different direction. There were other bodyguards on the previous train. And, oh, I don't care, frankly. One more bodyguard, one less bodyguard. He wanted to crack a joke at that, and I understand that he saw that I'm of a high rank too, so he thought I'll support him. But I rebelled. I said, no, don't joke about it. He stopped joking, but what I want to say here is that perhaps people who are away from the front, they could have played to that joke. But when you come back from the front, you know that every life is precious. And when you see somebody who is 1,000 kilometers away from the front, you cannot be talking about your people like that. Plus, your process is faulty here. We're laying here in the rain, and instead of fixing the process, you're telling us one more, one less of a bodyguard. Who cares? Right? And transferring it to be some sort of a joke. I did not like that. All right. We have a lot of food for thought. Thank you, dear friend. Thank you for coming, Anton. Thank you for coming to the stream. Please continue taking care of yourself, and thank you for agreeing to stay in touch and sharing your valuable experience. You guys can support Anton and his detachment. I actually was telling our viewers that you're near Pokrovsk, and you were near Kupiansk, right? Berestovoye, that area. Okay, so I stand corrected. I was wrong. You actually were right. There was a moment when we were supposed to be sent to that other location, but they changed a few things, and I did not even know where they're sending us. So that's how I ended up near Kupiansk. Yeah, it is on me, I think, Nikolai. That's okay. But it's frankly the same story everywhere. In any case, we are staying in touch. We are putting links to your fundraisers, guys, to your detachment. You're the ones that are often requesting the drones and other support, so we're trying to provide aid to your detachment. And under this video, there is a link to support that Paratroopers Storm Brigade. Take care, my friend. You too, Nikolai. Thank you, everybody who joined us today. Please support Armed Forces of Ukraine. Till later.